I would be willing to bet that you believe that practicing will make you better at guitar. That's what I believed, and so I practiced a lot, even though most of the time that I spent practicing didn't actually translate into progress. Most of the time, I was at a standstill, stuck, plateaued. And that was true even when I was succeeding, playing on a Broadway show, touring with a band, playing with symphonies, being on TV. And the whole time I felt like a fraud because compared to the other people in these bands, I had to work 10 times harder just to keep up. So even though I was living my dream, it was honestly kind of a grind. And I wish I knew then what I know now about what actually moves the needle and how to beat that plateau. So to help you on your guitar journey, here are 14 things I learned that will help you get unstuck. Lesson number 1. The first few years I played guitar, I practiced constantly, and I thought I was pretty decent. But then I jammed with a guy who was a couple years younger than me. He'd been playing guitar half as many years, and he practiced half as many hours, but he was way better than me. And this led me to the uncomfortable realization of lesson number 1. Natural talent is a real thing. It's not that he magically had it without trying, it's that his efforts reliably brought him results. To me, natural talent is just the ability to turn practice into progress efficiently. I was incredibly inefficient at turning practice into progress. And that brings us to lesson number 2. My friend Paul has perfect pitch. He can hear any chord and even without context immediately tell you what it is. If you ask him to sing a B flat, he'll sing a perfectly in tune B flat without any sort of external reference. Paul is so efficient at turning practice into progress that in the time it took me to be halfway decent at one instrument, he became absolutely world class at several instruments. Perfect pitch is maybe the canonical textbook example of natural talent. It's kind of assumed that if you've got perfect pitch, you're going to be a prodigy. But when you strip away the mythology, people with perfect pitch simply perceive a greater level of detail than the rest of us. That's the extreme case, but the real takeaway of lesson number 2 is that all natural talent really is just better, higher definition perceptions. And okay, that's nice to know, but it's not particularly useful until you get to lesson number 3. Most of my guitar playing life I've spent plateaued. I've traded huge amounts of practice for tiny incremental gains. I should mention, I watched the videos, I did the courses, I read the books, I took the lessons, I enrolled in music school, and I was disciplined and focused and consistent. But the only times I made big progress, the times I lurched from one plateau to the next, were the times when I trained and upgraded my perceptions. I didn't know this is what was happening at first, but once I realized it, I started deliberately training my perceptions. And when my perceptions improved, I got more naturally talented. And so my ability to efficiently turn practice into progress exploded. So lesson number 3 is that you can get more natural talent. Now, training your perceptions, it's not intuitive or obvious, so we should take a closer look in lesson number 4. Something I struggled a lot with was my time. I did most of my practice with a metronome and I could play without speeding up or slowing down. But when I listened back to live recordings of the band, there was definitely something off. One day, the music director pulled me aside and very kindly explained that I was rushing. I was hearing the beat slightly ahead of everyone else. And because of that, every note I played was just a little early. And again, this was despite practicing with a metronome. So I had to systematically recalibrate my perception of the beat. I had to learn to hear a finer level of detail so I could get my notes to sit back on top of the beat. And once I had recalibrated my perception of the beat, everything I played sounded better. Lesson number 4 is that all practice tools are perception tools. Metronomes help us perceive time. Mirrors help us perceive our technique and posture. Teachers help us perceive things we're not sophisticated enough to notice about ourselves. Ear training helps us perceive intervals and chord qualities. Transcribing helps us perceive greater detail in the music we hear. But they don't automatically do this. Having a metronome, a mirror, and a teacher, or spending time with ear training and transcribing, it's not enough. And that's the point of lesson number 5. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice doesn't make permanent. Practice too often doesn't even make progress. I put in hundreds of hours of practice and had almost nothing to show for it. And that continued until I fixed the true bottleneck, which was my ability to perceive what was lackluster about my current playing. And so lesson number 5 is simple. Don't practice. Or at least don't practice guitar and don't practice yet. Instead, work on improving your natural talent by improving your perceptions. I have a bunch of these perception training tools that I use with my private coaching clients. We don't have time in this video to get into all of them, but I want to get you started with one of the simplest ones. This is how I recalibrated my perception of the beat and fixed my time feel and finally stopped rushing. Again, I wasn't speeding up or slowing down, but I was playing out ahead of everyone else. So if our band was Mad Max Fury Road, everyone else was this wall of amps strapped to a car, and I was the Yutz with a guitar leaning precariously off the front, rushing. And to fix this, I would put on the metronome and I would set its volume so it would disappear when I played right on top of the beat. If I was ahead of the beat, I could hear the click still, but when I was directly on top of the beat, the click kind of disappeared. With my students, we call this bury the click, and if you can't bury the click with super simple stuff, you're not going to get a lot of benefit from practicing fancier stuff. Speaking of fancy stuff, let's talk about lesson number 6. Early on, I set out to learn theory, and I was confused by how disconnected it felt from the music I played. It was so academic and stodgy and fussy. And then, by pure dumb luck, I landed a gig where everyone else in the band was a seasoned professional musician. And when I saw how actual professional musicians use theory, it immediately gave me permission to discard these stuffy music theory concepts that I was getting from books and from music school. And the light bulb moment that is lesson number 6 is that music theory is just pattern recognition. It's helpful to think of theory as this happens often enough to have a name. For some musicians, metric modulation or Picardy thirds or the modal interchange, those might all be things that happen often enough to warrant knowing by name. But for musicians like me, and I suspect like you, the things that happen often enough to be worth naming are things like verse and chorus and 1-5-6-4 and halftime feel. It's generally best to learn the theory that's personally relevant to your situation. What's going to help you communicate with other musicians? What's going to give you more clarity about what you're hearing? What are the recurring patterns that happen in the music that you personally like? There was another thing I noticed about how professional musicians use music theory, and that brings us to lesson number 7. That boring music school theory I was learning from a book was almost entirely focused on notes, intervals, and scales. But these working professional musicians were equally and often more focused on the tempo and what beat does that thing land on and how many bars are in the form, because those things are more relevant in the music that most of us make. And from this, I learned lesson number 7, and that's that theory has 3 main flavors: the what, the when, and the how. What is the stuff that comes to mind when we think of music school theory: pitch, notes, and intervals, chords, and scales, and keys, and modes. When is rhythm, time, feel, beats, bars, and the form of a song. How is the dynamics, the techniques, the tones, the instrumentation, and even the equipment we use to achieve a sound. And they're all important, but one of them kind of gets neglected, and that's the subject of lesson number 8. I mentioned earlier that despite practicing with a metronome, my time and feel were not pro. When I listened to these actual pro musicians talk, they were kind of obsessed with time and feel. So then I got obsessed with time and feel, and it was a huge immediate upgrade to my playing. So lesson number 8 is that what gets all the attention, but when is just as, if not more, important. Truthfully, you need both. However, a simple idea played with great time is awesome, but a great idea played with crappy time sucks. When will always be a bottleneck for what? Let's look at the 80-20 of sounding pro in lesson number 9. As guitarists, we tend to gravitate towards conspicuously badass guitar playing. We get real excited about Eddie Van Halen's lead playing and kind of ignore the fact that he was a super creative rhythm guitar player and a great songwriter. The guitarists we follow on Instagram are all people who can do things we can't do. They're not people who can do the simple things better than we can. And that's fine. But it obscures a simple truth. Badass pros sound badass even when they're playing the simplest, most basic stuff. And so lesson number 9 is my shorthand mantra for what makes something sound pro. In tune, in time, with dynamics. In tune, in time, with dynamics. It's the holy trinity of what, when, and how. If you've got those 3 things, then you're 90% of the way there. And if you don't have those 3 things, nothing else you do is going to matter at all. Let's look at some other things you can safely ignore, starting with lesson number 10. My students tend to be successful people with analytical or engineering brains, and that makes them more likely to fall into what I call the theory trap. Oftentimes, these students will come to me kind of paralyzed by thinking that music theory is a blueprint or a rule book, that there's a best or a right answer. And so I always tell them that music theory is a misnomer, because naming things isn't theoretical, it's practical. And the only rule in music is this: if it sounds good, it is good. So lesson number 10 is to avoid the theory trap by letting songs be your teacher. If the theory isn't practical in the music you listen to, you probably don't need to know it. Let me give you a more specific example in lesson number 11. If you go on Reddit or hang out here on YouTube, you will see so much time spent talking about modes. So many teachers overhype them, so many learners are confused by them, and that's probably because so many people who don't actually understand them love to share their half-baked explanations. But with my own students, we barely ever talk about modes. Instead, we focus on really, truly learning chords, keys, and progressions. And when we do that, miracle of miracles, these same students find that they've learned modes on accident without even trying. So lesson number 11 is don't learn modes, at least not directly. If modes are even a little bit confusing for you, it's because you have holes in your knowledge further upstream. Filling those holes is way, way more useful than learning modes, and once you've done that, you'll probably find you don't even need the silly Greek names. It's all just chords. D Dorian is Greek for the 2 chord in the key of C. Phrygian dominant is Greek for the 3 chord is major instead of minor. If the 2 things I just said are not intuitively obvious, if they're Greek to you, then don't waste your time learning modes. Just learn more songs, more chords, keys, progressions. Don't drive yourself crazy recontextualizing the major scale with Greek names. Modes are not a skeleton key for music. In fact, let me go you one further with lesson number 12. In my 20s, I took lessons with a neoclassical shred guy, and he had me learning like all these exotic scales that I never ever got to use. And eventually I stopped practicing those, and I just doubled down on the 2 scales I used every day. It's been 20 years and I've never once needed anything else. It's like that Bruce Lee quote where he says he doesn't fear a guy who's practiced 1,000 kicks. He fears the guy who's practiced 1 kick 1,000 times. Yeah, that. It's the same deal. Lesson number 12 is that scales are overrated. You absolutely need to know the major scale. The pentatonic scale is practically written into your DNA. But if you know those 2 scales and you can see chords on the fretboard, you're golden. You're set. Okay, enough theory. Let's talk about gear in lesson number 13. I have spent tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours on gear and gear demos, and none of it has made me a better player, with 2 notable exceptions: DAWs and headphones. Logic Pro, Ableton Live, these ATH M50Xs, these AirPods Pro, those things have done more for my playing than every other piece of guitar gear I've ever owned. Lesson number 13 is that the best gear investment is a DAW and some headphones. A $200 boutique overdrive isn't going to change your life, but $200 spent on Logic Pro might. All these perception training tools that I've developed for my students, about half of them only work inside a DAW like Logic or Ableton while wearing headphones. Let's bring it on home with one last one. Lesson number 14. I wasted decades of my life trying to make progress through sheer determination and effort. But in just the last few years, we've gotten so many new tools that have completely reshaped the landscape of learning guitar. And so for the first time, people who have long been plateaued, people who are discouraged that their effort doesn't translate into results, those people finally have a path forward. So lesson number 14 is that now is the best time in history to learn guitar. Sure, the gear is better and cheaper, and yes, the information is wildly abundant. But most importantly, we now have the tools to improve our perceptions, which gets us more natural talent, which is exactly what gets us unstuck and dramatically accelerates our progress. Now is the best time in history to learn guitar. There you go, 14 lessons to help you get unstuck on guitar. If this resonates with you, please subscribe. If you want my help getting unstuck, there's a link in the description detailing how we can work together. I'll see you out there.